Hey guys, so today we're basically going to be working again on the calculator bit. So what I've basically done is I've merged kind of the Python file and the HTML file. So I'm using the Python one as a backend and then the HTML one as a front end. And I've also changed the HTML bit a bit so that all the calculation is happening in the Python one and then it's coming into the HTML one and being displayed there. So here we go. So over here you can see another program. So today we're going to be working with the calculator again. So by now we have done two different versions. So here we have the HTML one, and then we also have the PyChart, like the Python version. So here first, I'm just going to run this so like you know what I'm talking about. So here when I open this, then I'm pretty sure you remember this. So here we basically like alter the entire address to get the result of the calculation. And then over here, we've got the HTML one. So I made a few changes, but it works pretty much the same way. So if I open it in Chrome, for example, then here I've just moved the buttons a bit, but then if I enter like 4 and 4 and then add, so like it still works like the same way. But what I've done is I've made the Python file, I made this basically the back end, and I made this the front end. So if I just show you the code, then over here, earlier I used to do like the whole calculation in HTML, like, but now what I'm doing instead, I'm using this JavaScript API. So here I'm using the fetch API, and I've written it in a bit of JavaScript, but then here I have the fetch API. So I'm using this, and then once I'm giving, so if I, for example, add, so if I have the numbers 4 and 4, for example, then I'm doing input value 1 and input value 2, so 4 and 4. And after that, here I'm giving it the target element ID is equal to sum. Then here's my URL. So if you see this bit, so this is pretty much the same as over here when I do slash add. So this is basically where I'm picking it up from. So over here, I'm basically joining them. So this is coming from the Python file, and then over here, I'm basically putting that as the URL, and then add is equal to an n1, and then I'm basically like kind of concatenating it. And then here I've made like my own function called calculator and display result, where I'm putting the URL and target element ID. And then I'm basically using the fetch API so that it sends like the URL along with the method. And then over here in the backend, it's doing all of the calculation. And then I'm again using fetch to send it back. And over here, I've like done a lot of error handling. But basically, I'm using fetch to send it back. And after that, I'm displaying it with the HTML front end. So earlier in the last few programs, we basically like made a calculator over here with in Flask, and then here I've done it with HTML. But the only difference being that earlier I used to do all the calculation in HTML and in that one respectively. But now I basically made this one the backend and this one the front end kind of, and then I've just merged them together. So here we have that for all of the four, so addition, and then the same for subtraction, multiplication, and division. So if you see the difference between the URL here, we have slash add, slash sub, and then slash mul, and then div. And over here we have like, then we have already gone through this. Like for example, in the front end we have like the sky blue background, and then we have like the labels. So we have like the input boxes, and then the first number, second number, and then it also doesn't accept like alphabets, and like so on. And on click, I'm calling all four of these functions. And then in the functions themselves, I'm basically putting in like this URL, and then I'm calling this function. So call calculator and display result, which I've defined up here. And then it basically has like these parameters, so the URL and then the target element ID. and then I'm basically fetching the URL and then like with the get method. So if I, for example, change the method to post and run it again, so if I enter 2 and 2, for example, then it's like giving an error method not allowed. So basically, so then here I'm basically giving it like the correct method, and then I'm using dot 10, and then I'm doing like, so fetch is basically like, so we have fetch, and then there's also another concept of a promise, which is basically like where fetch is making like kind of like a deal with you. So basically it's going to go and it's promising that it's going to go give the data. So it's basically moving between both of the different, so it's moving between both the applications. So it's moving between the HTML and the Python file, and then it's just moving the data around so that it can do the calculation. Because I need a way for the numbers, for example 4 and 4, I need a way for the numbers to go to the Python file and then the sum to come back into the HTML so it can be displayed, for example.